Have you ever unknowingly fathered a child and had them show up much later announcing that you're their dad? Like many others on this thread, I was the secret kid. I met my real father when I was 7. I remember taking the news that I have a new dad pretty well myself. Sometimes kids are more resilient than we give them credit for. New dad welcomed me into his family, and I started to live with him after kind of a messy custody battle. Everyone gets along now. The funnier side of this is that, until I met my real dad, my mom told me that my father was my half brother's father, which would be a pretty reasonable cover, except that I was white and he and my brother were black. As a young kid, I didn't second guess this at all. Might be why mom decided 7 was the right time to tell me, before I figured it out myself. Mom likes to tell a cute story now about how, one day when I was in preschool, my black dad was going to pick me up from school instead of my mom, and all day I kept telling the teacher, wait until you see my dad, you're going to be so surprised. At the end of the day he shows up, this 6'3" very black man in an airport uniform and hat, and I look at my teacher and I say, are you ready to be surprised? And I pull off his hat and gleefully exclaim, he's bald. Edit. Thank you for the gold, kind stranger. I want to tell my mom that her story got me internet points, but I don't think she'd be happy about me airing our family's dirty laundry, so let's keep it a secret. My uncle fits this category in spades. Fathered his first child at 14. My grandfather enabled his shitty behavior by buying him a house across the street from his junior high so he could still go to school. That child died at 18 after not seeing his father for 16 years. He has had 2 more legitimate children, both of whom he barely knows. The last 2 years have been very productive. He has had 2 children contact him out of nowhere to establish paternity. One is around 40 and lives in Texas, and the other is 22 and lives in Idaho. My uncle only remembers the dalliance that resulted in the 22-year-old. These girls have only contacted him for their own curiosity and to try to establish some kind of meaningful bond with the missing piece of their childhood. Sadly, they were only to find out that they were sad by one of the worst people on earth. Luckily for these girls, my grandfather put a provision in my uncle's trusts for just such an event. When paternity is established, each child is given a lump sum and a continuing distribution from their father's trusts. It has been karmic justice watching my uncle's income dilute so quickly and how he squirms every time another trustee is added. Neither of these girls had any clue about who their father really was, and so for them to find out they are suddenly wealthy is so satisfying. The 22-year-old had just graduated college with massive student department. When she was invited by me to come to TX and meet her family that does care, she was so happy to finally have that missing piece of her life filled. So my shbag uncle, and when she came to the family office and was told she will have all her debts paid in full, she actually passed out. Great girl who hasn't let her newfound wealth destroy her dream of being a trauma nurse. Losing an additional $6,000 a month from his trust gave him another heart attack, which is what he calls it when he gets alcohol poisoning from his epic benders. The 40-year-old newfound daughter is understandably skeptical of the rest of us, but she is slowly coming around. The 22-year-old had no real family, so to speak of, and has embraced us fully. It is a slow process trying to catch up on 22 years of total absence, but we all love her as though we have known her our whole lives. The strangest thing for her was meeting my sister, her first cousin, because they look so much alike. She was also able to meet the matriarch of our family, our aunt, and get to know her in the last year of her life, which taught her how it's only her father who places no value on family bonds. With the exception of my uncle, we are a very tight-knit, loving family. My cousins are more like brothers and sisters, so we all have much contempt for our uncle for depriving us of knowing these sisters. That's a really smart move by your grandfather. I have never heard of that before. I am not the daddy in this story, but the daughter. My mother and father had a one-night standoff tequila that ended with me. My father was a US soldier in Germany, and simply put, my mother didn't want to ruin his life with a child. She was a German native and didn't want to ruin a young man's life, and essentially force him to marry her. Eventually my mother fell in love with an American a few years later, and we moved to the States. After I graduated high school, I decided to look for my father. I didn't want to find him until I was 18 because I never wanted him to think I wanted anything from him. It was strictly wanting to know who he was, who I was. When I was 21 years old, I ended up finding him on Facebook. I always knew two things about him, his name, and where he was stationed. I looked at his picture and this man had my freaking chin. It took me 2 hours to write him a message. You have no idea how hard it was. How do you even start? Hey, I'm your kid, he looked just like me. He wrote me back the next morning. My heart raced a million beats a minute. He actually believed me from the get-go. He spoke on the phone with my mother. They both remembered each other and their time in Germany. We never did a DNA test, we both knew I looked like him, and my half-sister. My father was upset with my mother for never telling him, but he understood the reasoning. After visiting my father and his family for 2 months, I decided to move to Colorado and live nearby to create a relationship with him and my new sister. I think I walked into the situation a little too optimistic. It wasn't as easy as I had hoped to create a father-daughter relationship. We were perfect strangers. He never had the chance to grow up with me or understand my personality. Truth be told, we didn't really like each other. After a few months of living in Colorado, we decided to end our contact. I haven't spoken to him in over a year now. I feel relieved to know who I am, what I am. I'm currently married and have a child on the way. He's aware that he has a grandchild on the way, but isn't interested in a relationship. I'm on a mobile device, so I'm sorry if it's not totally detailed, but I'm very open to any questions if you have any. Or PM me. This actually happened to my father. My dad grew up with my mom. Their parents lived next door to one another, and both coming from large families, they played with each other as children. Though my mom was adopted away from her parents, another story for another time, she returned home at the age of 14. My dad has been in love with my mom since the day she returned home. He was 16 at the time, but my mom was uninterested. Over the next 2 years, they pursued relationships with other people. My mom ended up becoming pregnant at 16, but the father was a heroin addict, whom she didn't want in her future child's life. She began to show interest in my father at that point. She's 16. He 18, and my father left his girlfriend to be with her, knowing that my mother was pregnant, to help raise the child. Her intentions were not the most pure, in that she didn't love him, and was mainly seeking a provider in my dad. This is where it gets weird. 15 years later, my dad notices a fire in the woods that ran alongside our house. He ran down to investigate and found a boy my sister's age down there who was the only one he caught, his friends escaping. It was a small fire and easily extinguished, but it could have gone badly, and he was trespassing, so my father called the police. When my father went to court over the trespass and fire, he found out that the boy was his ex-girlfriend's son, and also his. She had never told him, because she was angry about him leaving her for my mom. My dad ended up dropping charges, and we got to spend more time with my brother. I joke a lot on Reddit, but this is my serious story, and I need to tell it. 2009 was a bad year for me. I lost my mother, then just 5 months later, which was only 3 months before the intended wedding date, my fiancé left me for my groomsmen. I was in a pretty dark place, but I was staying busy with college. A couple months after my fiancé ended things, our mutual friend was getting married, so I knew I'd have to face her, literally. I had no choice. She was in the wedding party, and I was the photographer. About a month before the day, I was studying in the cafeteria of my school during lunchtime, and a girl approached me. She was cute and needed a place to sit. So I forfeited my studying and talked to her for a bit. Somehow, we got to talking about how incredibly nervous I was to go to that wedding. I guess she thought it was cute or endearing or whatever because hung out a bit longer, swapped numbers, met for lunch for a couple weeks, and eventually went back to her place the day before the wedding. We didn't leave that apartment all day. Monday at lunch, I met with her in the cafeteria. She seemed off, but it was Monday, so we were all a little tired. That was the last time I saw her though. She stopped texting after a couple days, and I lost contact. A year later, I was with a new girlfriend, had a new job, and was still taking classes. But there was a day in November when I got a strange letter from an address about 30 minutes north of me, and it was from her. She wrote, detailing that she was sorry for disappearing, and that she found out about a month after she stopped talking to me that she was pregnant and it had to be mine. The name she gave our baby was Samantha Haley, after her mother and best friend who helped her through the pregnancy. But then she wrote at me she couldn't tell me sooner because it was too hard, and then explained that she'd miscarried very late term. I wrote back to the address on the envelope, asking for more information and for her to call me to talk about it. But I never heard anything back. I know this wasn't exactly the story you were asking for, but this is the closest thread I've seen, and I needed to get it out. This happened to my father. His dad had no idea he existed. My dad never wanted to search for his parents, but my mom was rather nosy and did so. She was successful and had talked to his dad, who had been told he died in childbirth. Upon finding both real parents, the dad wanted to meet him. He lived about an hour from my dad's hometown. The mother lived farther away in the US and wanted nothing to do with my dad, even after sending them cards and phone calls. My father and mother eventually met my dad's biological father along with his new wife. They were both happy and it all went well. So well that my dad took me to see them and their whole family and have seen them numerous times since. However, this is an intermediate family secret because the adopted parents of my dad would be horribly heartbroken. TLDR, dad adopted. Found biological parents at age 44ish. Went well with dad, but not mom. Obligatory not me but yada yada. My uncle was a ladies' man. He loved the ladies and he cheated on my aunt all the time. He fathered several children out of wedlock, and he was smart about it because all of them had some sort of combination of Alcides and their name Spanish is not his last name. Alcides was his first name, so either first or middle name. So I have several cousins by Alcides Joseph, Elisa Alcides, Daisy Alcidisa, Daniel Alcides, Juan Jose Alcides, Alcidita Maria. We thought that was it, but when he passed away, 3 new cousins showed up to the funeral: Antonio Alcides, Reynaldo Alcides and Ana Maria Alcides. My aunt was having a fit because of this. I thought if I were one of them and I meet a hookup with Alcides and their name might be like Nope. A machismo in Latin America. Not me, my ex-brother-in-law had this happen. He played football at college, was quite the man on campus, and went on to become a very respected specialist doctor. He married my sister late in life, and his fully grown late 30s or early 40s, completely unknown son contacted him out of the blue. My sister took it in stride. She got along with the biological son better than his biological father did. Apparently my ex-Bill's college girlfriend got pregnant, broke up with him, and disappeared to have the child quietly. At least, that was the story told to me. His family was well-to-do, they might have engineered something. This was quite a while ago, and in a very conservative part of the country. I think my ex-Bill was scandalized by the whole thing. Doubly so because his biological son was openly gay. I never met the son, but I heard he looked a lot like his biological father. When the son went looking for his biological dad, the folks he talked to wouldn't give him a name but told him to look at the ye-books. Apparently the family resemblance was strong enough to make things clear. When I was 10, my father cheated on my mother during a business trip. A year later, he gets a call from the woman saying she had a son, but wanted nothing from him seeing as she was financially comfortable. He told my mother right away, but kept it from my brother and I until we were in our 20s. My mother managed to forgive him over time and they have a great marriage now. He maintained a relationship with the kid throughout his life, seeing him every couple of months when he traveled for business. Finding out my straight-laced, hard-working, never fricked up in his life father was capable of such a massive secret life was earth-shattering to my brother and I, and frankly I now have some trust issues with people. My mother, brother and I have all met the boy. He's an amazingly bright and sweet kid who I love, and I truly cherish our relationship, but I am now torn between taking it further and potentially hurting my mother, who managed to swallow her pride after finding out and staying with my dad in order to maintain the great life my brother and I had. The whole ordeal has made me closer with her, considering I now know what an incredible strong and dedicated mother she is. My father wants my brother and I to have a relationship with him, but insists we keep his existence a secret from our extended family and friends, for the sake of protecting my mother's pride. This is the big kicker for me. How I am supposed to have a relationship with someone whose existence I'm not supposed to formally acknowledge. The problem is, the kid is turning 15 this year, and his understanding of his situation is that my dad had temporarily split with my mom, got together with his mom, then got back together with mine. I'm afraid that as he gets older and starts putting things together, the reality of him being a bastard who almost tore a family apart will frick him psychologically. As of now, he's a normal, bright, sweet 14-year-old. Most of our conversations involve him hounding me for tips on getting girls. TL. Dr. Dad had a secret kid after an affair, found out when I was 20. Form a better relationship. Don't insult him because of something he had no control of. I met my father when I was in grade 7 at school. I grew up with 2 half brothers and my mum in the house. I had never even considered my dad. When I was in primary school, kids would ask where is your dad, and I would respond I don't have a dad. I didn't say somewhere, I don't know. I was so unaware I didn't even think I had a dad. My mum just didn't want him to get involved in my life. After the death of my granddad, he was my father figure. I became curious and got my father's phone number off my grandma. We arranged over the phone to meet at a nearby Subway for lunch. I took my cousin, he's like my third bro, and as we drove in I was trying to guess which man walking around was my dad. It was weird, I was so unsure I couldn't even pinpoint which one was my dad. We walked over to Subway, my cousin gave me the heads up that the man sitting down was my dad, and I met him and gave him a mighty good handshake. 4 years later, I've seen him about 5 times. He's so different to how I've grown up, he's more old-fashioned. But I visit him every so often to catch up with things. The interesting thing is, it feels like a chore rather than fun for me every time I see him. Didn't happen like 20 years later or whatever, but still relevant I suppose. When my husband was 16 he got his girlfriend pregnant. They had a pretty typical relationship for teenagers in that they frequently broke up and got back together. Not long after they found out she was pregnant she broke up with him and they went their separate ways for a short period of time, maybe a month or so. During that time they were both seeing other people and my husband had a one-night stand with some girl at a party. Fast forward a little bit and of course he and the ex end up back together. Years later, after their relationship was long gone and we had gotten married, his ex filed to have child support via DHR he has been paying. This was basically just to make it legal. Some issue with her trying to get food stamps and them requiring proof of income. Whatever, we knew the summons was coming for it, so no big whoop until we got 2 of them. One didn't have my stepson's name on it, it had some other kid's name. We assumed it was a mistake and contacted DHR, but they swore it was legit. To make a long story short, the one-night stand girl found out about his ex filing for child support and wanted money as well for the child she never bothered to tell him about. He was 7 by this time and had been calling her husband dad his entire life. We had a DNA test done. It was his child and he has to financially support him. The woman brainwashed the kid into believing we were going to try to take him away from the only dad he's ever known, so he is terrified of my husband. It's a pretty lose-lose situation now. It feels like even trying to be part of his life is going to scar him and she is no help. I sense a condom commercial in here somewhere. I don't understand why the frick someone would need child support when they're already married. What? Her husband doesn't feed or house the kid? This is why people think only welfare queens ask for child support. The first time I had sex, I was about to turn 14. It was with one of my cousin's friends that I had just met that day. The whole thing was a blur. I found out she was pregnant later on, but my cousin assures me it's for her boyfriend whom she cheated on with me. For about a year, I was terrified she would come looking for me to get a DNA test. Never happened. I kind of forgot about all of this and moved on until recently. Out of curiosity, I went on Facebook and found the girl, then saw her with her 20-year-old son in one of her pictures and he looks exactly like me, albeit a bit white trash ghetto type. After looking at all of his pictures, I'm about 99% sure I am the father. His dad looks nothing like him. I doubt he will ever find out. This is a weird situation. Either just ignore it and know you have a kid out there, or reach out and risk wrecking his home life. I'm the daughter. I grew up in a pretty average family, an older sister, mom and dad. I always knew I was adopted. I got gifts at Christmas from my birth mother and grandparents who had my older brother. It didn't really click that I didn't belong with mom and dad until a kid at school found out I was adopted and began making fun of me for not knowing my real parents. I talked to my brother over the phone and he said it was okay cause I still had parents that loved me lots. Didn't really care to get to know my birth mother until I was in my early teens. I started exchanging emails with her and eventually was invited to go meet the family at her brother's wedding. I clicked with most people. The other teens had similar interests and we had a great time hanging out. Fast forward a few years and just after I graduated, my birth mom and brother came to visit for my grad. I wanted to know who my father was. The mother that raised me explained that my birth mother was a bit adventurous before my birth. And when asked who my father was for the birth certificate had said I don't know. My birth mother agreed to help find my father. It was interesting, we went through her list and marked the ones it most definitely couldn't be the ones with darker skin. I am very white. We then sent emails to all the ones we could track down and some agreed to do paternity tests, others took one look and said I wasn't theirs. Finally we got to the bottom of the list. There was one guy left and no way to contact him, but she knew how to contact his mother. We explained the situation to this woman, her name is Nan, and she was wonderfully kind. Nan arranged for herself and one of her daughters to meet me first. They were great. I loved hanging out with Nan and her daughter. Her daughter brought her kids, they were very sweet. Nan seemed set in the idea that I was indeed part of the family. So she called Mick. He agreed to come over and even agreed to the test my birth mother insisted. He was amazing. We sat on Nan's balcony and even at 19 I couldn't help but just stare. I had seen my own features in Nan's daughter and her children but thought it just wishful thinking. This was just crazy. I had the same eyes, nose, and even our chins were similar. We did the test and stayed in contact. I found out he's a mechanic with a wife who is very jealous that I found my birth parents and 3 stepchildren. I found out I have 14 cousins and 4 siblings through him, 3-step and 1 half-brother whose mother put him up for adoption. Mick is amazing. I talk to him all the time even though I live on the other side of the country. His family is very accepting and I send my 14 little cousins stuff whenever I get the chance. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and leave a comment.